Hello and welcome to Catamount Community Connection, our weekly one-hour public affairs program here on Catamount Radio. Each and every week across all 5 stations, we talk with community leaders from the business, professional, public affairs, nonprofit, and yes, political arenas. Our program is brought to you by the Rutland County Agricultural Society, which has brought you the Vermont State Fair at Rutland since 1846, even before the Civil War. And we're already looking forward to the 180th Vermont State Fair coming up this August. It will also, besides being the 180th fair, celebrate the 180th birthday of the United States of America. So we're looking forward to that. And I want to thank the Agricultural Society for their continued support of the program. Today, we will be speaking with Representative Chris Pritchard, who is the rep for Middletown Springs, Rupert, Wells, Paulet, and Tinmouth. And Chris is sitting on the House Committee on Environment, and I'll let him explain how many members are on that committee and what their jurisdiction is in terms of the bills that they consider. I want to mention right off the bat, it's just my opinion, but for what it's worth, I think you have represented that area better than anyone since I've been in the legislature over the last 12 years, Chris. So I first want to thank you for doing that. I understand you have made a decision not to seek re-election next year, but just wanted to get that right out front. Again, I think you are very engaged with the communities down there or over there, and get to as many meetings as you can. You're as busy as a senator, and I know you've worked hard to get some things done. So maybe we can start by just having you give us a little bit of biographical information or biographical information, where you were born, where you were raised, all that kind of stuff, what employment you have had over the years, and welcome into the show, first of all.
Yeah, well, thank you much. Thank you very much, Brian. It's a pleasure to have this opportunity, and it's been a real pleasure to be able to serve the people I represent. It's been humbling, and I'm grateful that they've given me the opportunity. So I'm a native Vermonter. I was born in Burlington. That's where my mom wanted me to be born. She was a registered nurse and had ties there. So I was born in Burlington, and I grew up in South Poultney. I was raised in South Poultney, and I lived right next to a legislator that was in the House for many, many years, Danny DeBonis, which we referred to as Denny. He was known as Denny in the neighborhood. But I grew up in Poultney. I went through the Poultney school system, elementary school and high school, and I graduated in 1980. I immediately went into the workforce and started in the automotive field, washing cars for Phil Alderman. That's where I got my start, and worked through the different departments. I'm grateful for that opportunity. It really gave me the insight on how all the departments work together to make a dealership run. So I worked for Phil right out of high school, and then I went to Joe Drugan at Imported Cars. Joe owned a Saab Volvo dealership, and I worked for Joe for a while, and both were great experiences. Joe decided to sell the dealership, and so a great opportunity came up for me that I was given by Jim and John Hand in Manchester to work at their Chevrolet Volkswagen dealership. And I worked for Jim and John for 27 years as their service manager, and they're just wonderful people. I'm so grateful for the opportunity that they gave me. And after that, I my wife had taught for 40 years. We decided to retire together. So in 2021, we retired. Jim and John had sold the dealership a little bit before I could retire. So I finished up my last 5 or 6 years at the Subaru dealership in Rutland, and I worked with some real great people there. Got to meet Brian and a lot of the legislators because a lot of them had Subarus, and when I finished up there, my wife and I just kind of hung around the house, and I had watched the happenings in Vermont, and instead of sitting in the chair with a bunch of my other friends complaining about it, I decided that I would get engaged. So that's how I ended up in the legislature.
Okay. And a successful campaign in your initial effort, and the Speaker decided to put you on the House Committee on Environment, and that sounds rather expansive. Yeah. I believe there are, for the most part, 11 members of every House committee. The Senate, with fewer members, we only have 30 as opposed to 150 in the House. We only have mostly 5 people in a committee. The money committees have a little bit more. One of them, I believe, House or Senate Education has 6, and then both Finance and Appropriations have 7. So we don't have as big a group in terms of committees, but for the most part, I think you guys are at 7. Maybe some of the money committees have more members. I'm not even sure in the House.
Yeah, so there's 11 members on our committee. And there's 4 Republicans, myself, Mike Tagliavia, Rob North, and Larry Labor, who's the vice chair. There's 1 progressive, Kate Logan from Burlington, and the chair, Amy Sheldon from Middlebury, is a Democrat, and the rest of the members are Democrats. So Larry Sakowitz, Ella Chapin, who's from East Montpelier, Larry's from Randolph. Sarita Austin, who's from Colchester, and Christy Morris from Springfield, and Mike White from Heartland area.
And what are some of the areas of jurisdiction that your committee takes up?
So one of the big areas of jurisdiction is Act 250. Anything to do with Act 250, Act 181, which has now come to the forefront. There's a lot of folks concerned of the implications that that this law that's starting to be implemented is going to have on rural folks. I think it's going to do great harm to them, and we had a couple bills that would address this in our committee. Unfortunately, our chair was unwilling to take them up, and now with crossover. It's unfortunate, but we're not going to get the opportunity to do that. We also deal with clean water issues and forestry and parks and fish and wildlife issues. Fish and wildlife was really an important reason that I wanted to be on that committee. It's something near and dear to me. I have a great amount of appreciation and respect for the professionals at the Vermont Fish and Wildlife Department. They have a pretty full plate of the things that they're responsible for, and really they're responsible for all the the wildlife and flora and fauna and reptiles and amphibians in the state for all the people to enjoy. It's a big task, and they do a wonderful job. I've always felt that department was underappreciated and underfunded. They seem to be the ones that get the crumbs at the end of the appropriation trail. So I'm hoping that that'll change. But it's been a real pleasure to be able to advocate for them, and I've gotten to be to have a really great relationship with Commissioner Batchelder and a lot of his staff. So it's been a great experience. But those are the things essentially that we cover in our committee, Brian.
We're talking with Representative Chris Pritchard, who lives in Paulet and represents that town along with Middletown Springs, Rupert, Wells, and Tinmouth. And Chris sits on the House Committee on Environment. And we'll certainly talk a little bit more further on in the show about Act 181. And we're recording this on the 22nd of March, so it will air on the 29th of March. And some of what we may be talking about a little bit later, it's the danger if we're recording something, may already have happened, even though as we're recording it, it hasn't. So we're sort of looking to the future for some of those things. But I am curious, Chris, you have decided to, I guess, retire again. And I'm just, if you can look back on the term that you're going to finish up here whenever we get out, whether that's May or June at this point, what are some of the things that you didn't expect, I guess, and some of the things that you found to be, rather pleasant? And I don't know, maybe let us know why you're not coming back, because I was serious when we started the show. I really feel, and I've been there since 2014, that you are the best representative that those 5 communities have had. Because, again, I think you're engaged. I see you talking to people all the time and emailing back and forth. And so I would love to have been able to have you on the show and talk about reelection, but you're not going to run again. So I'm not sure who will be in that seat next year. But, if you can kind of just look back on the 2 years, term and let us know how you felt about everything.
Yeah. I guess I'll start with the good things, the things that happened. Right, starting from the campaign, I got a great amount of support from a lot of folks that helped me, and you were a big part of that, Brian. You and Dave Weeks and Terry Williams and Patty McCoy. You helped me along the way. You went to all my sign waves. And I had a tremendous amount of people, from the 5 towns that invested a lot of their personal time on my behalf. And, I'm extremely grateful for that. The reason that I wanted to get into this really is I just wanted to help people. I wanted to help people in my, in the towns I represent, and just felt that, some of the policies that were put forth and put into law were harmful to people. They were just crushing them. I came in with, when we were going to experience a 11 to 12% property tax increase, something that, has been kind of consistent. I mean, the costs for Vermonters continues to rise. And for a lot of those folks that I grew up with, that have worked and lived in this Vermont economy, and it's their only means of income, it's been a real struggle, and it's very hard for me to understand why a lot of folks that I serve with don't really get that message. So I wanted to try to change that. The big thing, I think, one of the things that I'm most grateful for as I look back at this is, and it goes in line with, I just wanted to help people. I've had about 61 folks in the 5 towns reach out to me with different concerns on stuff. Some of it's small. I guess none of it's small when it comes from that individual, but some of the things have been relatively easy to help them with, and some folks I haven't been able to help. There's not a legislative path, but I have a list. I keep track of it, and in the event that a legislative path opens up, I bring that. But I want to be able to try to find a way to help them. I had one constituent, and this is probably the thing that really made me happy and made this whole thing worthwhile, is I had one constituent in a town that I serve that called me one day, and I was only in the legislature about a week or so I was still trying to get my feet underneath me. And I got this call on a Friday afternoon as I was leaving the State House to come home for the weekend. And it opened up with a tearful, I could hear the person on the other end of the phone crying. And, after a few seconds, she said, "Chris, this is, she indicated who she was, and I knew the person, and I said, what's up? What can I help you with? And she says, well, I've been to everybody that I can think of, and I just can't find any help, and this is my problem. We have a family business. We use QuickBooks for our accounting software, and I got an email one day that I thought was from QuickBooks, and I clicked on it, and then maybe clicked into it a little bit too much, and once I realized that this wasn't from QuickBooks, I emailed them. 2 hours later, I get an email back from them that says, we've received the invoice from your vendor, and we've paid him the $60,000.
Oh,
we're trying to take it from your account, and it's not there. And so obviously this is something that was distressing, to say the least, to the person. So not really knowing what to do, I reached out to some fellow legislators and asked for their opinion, and they directed me over to the Attorney General's office next door. So I took a walk over to see Charity Clark. She wasn't there, and I ended up seeing the Assistant Attorney General, and he came down, and I got my constituent on the phone. We talked together, and a long story short, after a few weeks, he was able to make her whole. And she said it. This changed my life. So those are the good things. Those are the things that that I'm appreciative to have the opportunity to it. And it's not just the legislative end of it. I have some folks from Rupert that have a concern. Really has nothing to do with a legislative issue. It's more of a town issue. But they reached out to me and they asked me if I would get involved. It was about having a rescue squad service and being served by a squad that was much closer to them. So I've been involved in that, and really that's all I've tried to do. And the other thing, quite honestly, that I said that I would do is I would represent all people, and even those that view things differently than I do. And I've done that. I've had several people that I know didn't support me because they had Robin signs on their lawn, and that's fine. For me, the whole thing was, I went out and wanted to tell people how I felt and where my views were. And Robin tried to do the same thing, and then we let the people decide. And I was proud of the campaign both of us ran. We were both very respectful to each other, and that's really the way it should be. At the end of the day, we deliver our thoughts, and people decide who they think will best represent them. So, but I've had many of the folks that I know had supported Robin reach out to me, and I've helped them. I think the nice thing about this job is I found that it gives me access to people that can fix things that normal folks just don't have access to. And so, the ability to utilize that on their behalf has been great. And I've met a lot of great people across state agencies that have done nothing but try to help me with constituent problems. So I've been very grateful for that.
We're talking with Representative Chris Pritchard, by the way, who represents Middletown Springs, Rupert, Wells, Paulet, and Tinmouth. The Robin of which he spoke was Robin Chestnut Tangerman, who was the previous representative from those same towns. And I did attend a so-called debate at one of the fire stations in your area, and I do agree. I think you both were professional and polite and civil. And it was a great evening, and people I think that attended were able to see differences in policy feelings, and then, as you said, they made their choice in November of 24, and you were elected. And again, I think you've done a great job. I didn't think Robin did a bad job. We feel differently about certain issues, and that's the way things are. But I think you are very what's the right word? You're accurate in the way that I feel. And again, you're in the House and I'm in the Senate, so a lot of times people judge their own career by how many bills they introduced and how many bills passed, and they have a list of all these wonderful things. To me, it's much more important to take that individual call from somebody who's frustrated at the morass of state government and not being able to get to the person they need to get to fix something. And it shouldn't be this way. But you're right. If you say I'm Representative Chris Pritchard and I say I'm Senator Brian Collamore, it seems like it unlocks a door and they get at least to speak with whom they need to get things fixed. So whether it's whatever agency you want to pick, and they've been trying, they've emailed and they've called and they've been on hold for hours and they just can't seem to get anything done. And then they reach out to one of us and all of a sudden it seems like magic that things happen. So I'm not saying it happens all the time, and it shouldn't be that way. It really should not be that way, but it is. So I'm much more in line with your feelings about that, Chris, than, I could talk about what bills I introduced and what bills passed, but to me, that's not the report card. The report card that matters is whether you actually help somebody. And as you said, you had a really good example of how that worked. And I've had people the same way, whether they're after a renewal of a permit or a license, and they just can't seem to find who it is that they need to talk to, and we intervene and they get stuff done. So well done with that. And we're talking again on the 22nd of March. This will air on the 29th. I could speak from my own experience. What sort of surprised you about the job? You get elected and you go up and you think, okay, I'm going to change the world.
Yeah,
maybe.
Well, that's kind of what I thought.
Yeah, and it doesn't work that way.
No, it doesn't. I think, one of the things that when we were elected, when the freshmen were elected, that we went through is we went through a 3-day orientation at the State House, which was just wonderful. Governor Snelling's son ran that for us. And so we spent 3 days, the freshmen, Democrats, Republicans, independents, visiting with each other and working with each other and learning the process of what happens there. And I really got to know a lot of great people on both sides of the aisle. I mean, I have a tremendous amount of friends up there that are Democrats. They're good people, and I reach out to them and we talk, a lot about different things, mostly to understand why we view things differently. But rather than throw sticks and stones at each other and get into ideological warfare, I think one of the things for me that was great is that the bond that we formed, and this will go to my frustration of, I'll speak to my frustration of things, the bad things that I've experienced there, and really it's been the reason that I just have a difficult time wanting to return. So, over the 3 days we got to develop great relationships, and we were all up there for the same reason. The big talk was, affordability. That's why what we all ran on, and it was an important issue to folks. And so the group decided, once we were sworn in, that we would every couple weeks go off site from the State House, find a venue that we could all get together with, sit down and talk, and try to understand our differences, talk about the issues that we thought were affecting people on the affordability front, and try to work together and collaborate together to meet each other to find solutions that would help this. And these meetings were great. The first one, Sandy Pincinall, the representative from Dorset, she arranged through the VFW. She's involved in the VFW, and that was our first venue. The subsequent venues happened at AGT, which is a construction kind of big building corporation that's down the street from the State House, and it's run by the main person that we got to meet there that kind of runs it. His name is Richard Wabi, and we approached him, and he was just so enthusiastic about us getting together to sit down and talk together with each other. He just thought that was so important, to the point that he provided the venue. And not only did he provide the venue, he bought us pizza and wings and paid for everything, and just said, listen, you folks got to talk and work together. This is what needs to happen up here. So things were going along great, and we had a fourth meeting that we were supposed to have. And when we got to the meeting, none of our Democratic friends were there. And we kind of couldn't really figure out why that was, but the next morning at breakfast, there's one of them. I've become close friends with him, and he sits with Brian and I and some other folks every morning for breakfast. I said to him, what happened? How come you guys didn't show up? And he said, we were approached by leadership and told that we were not to be part of this anymore. I found that it really bothered me. It still does. And that's one of the big things, big frustrations I had. And the other, quite honestly, is just the power structure that is there. I have a real problem with it. And I got, I wasn't only there 2 or 3 weeks and kind of, I'm a slow learner, but I figured it out, and it was discouraging. And really, the Speaker of the House and the chairs of the committee of the House hold all the power, and you have 13 or 14 people that decide what happens. They decide what bills move and what bills don't move. And I found that to be, quite honestly, undemocratic. I feel that committees, we should sit and talk together, and the bills on the wall. 4 of our committee members went several times to our chair to ask for bills that we felt were good for people, that they would help people, and they were related to Act 181.
Yeah.
And she refused to really bring those up. At some point, she allowed what I call a drive-by, as more to patronize us than really have a good discussion on the bills. We just, it's been frustrating. There's bills on our wall that will help folks, and we should have the ability to at least have a discussion on them, and it doesn't happen there. And I just find that, quite frankly, unconscionable.
Okay. So. We're talking with Representative Chris Pritchard, who will not be seeking re-election next year. And we're going to take our first break here on Catamount Community Connection. We'll be back with Chris in just a moment. Welcome back to Catamount Community Connection. I'm your host, Brian Collamore. Each week, we take a look at different areas of interest, hopefully to folks, and we speak with business, professional, nonprofit, and political leaders around Rutland County. It's centered around Rutland County for the most part, although we certainly are talking about statewide issues as well. And our show, again, brought to you by the Rutland County Agricultural Society, which has brought you the Vermont State Fair at Rutland. All the way back in 1846 was the first fair. And we're looking forward to the 180th Vermont State Fair coming up this August. As soon as I get an indication from Robert Congdon about who might be coming to the fair, we'll have him on as a guest one of these weeks and be able to provide a little bit more information on that. Today, we're talking with Representative Chris Pritchard, who lives in Paulet, and represents in the House Paula, Tinmouth, Wells, Rupert, and Middletown Springs, and has indicated, well, some of his frustration with the process. And it took me, well, I'm still learning. This will be my 12th year as we wrap things up, hopefully soon. And I still don't understand everything about how things work. The process is very complicated. There are layers of it that you get trapped sometimes figuring out, okay, this is what's going to happen next, and it doesn't happen that way. So I share your frustration sometimes, Chris. I'm trying to learn the same things you found disturbing and not really comfortable in your first term. And anyway, not coming back, unfortunately, because, again, I think you've done a great job. Chris sits on the House Committee on Environment. So we started to talk a little bit about Act 181. This was a bill, I don't remember. It was a House bill, and it had a certain number to it. I don't remember what that number was. But once a bill is signed into law or becomes law, in this case, without the governor's signature, it turns into an act. And then unless you know what year that act was, you can't find it again. But most people realize Act 181 was a revision of our Land Use Act, which goes all the way back to the 70s with Act 250. And I think you correctly pointed out when we first touched upon the act, I think it speaks to the divide between urban areas of our state and the rural areas. And certainly Rutland County is rural in nature for the most part. We do have the city of Rutland with somewhere around 16,000 people. But for the most part, a lot of the outlying towns are still very rural, and populations are, in the hundreds in some cases. So this particular act was put into play back in 2023, as I remember. The governor did not agree with many of the provisions in the bill and vetoed it. I did vote no on the bill when it came to the Senate floor. I want folks to know that. And then the governor vetoed it. And back in 2023, the Democrats had that so-called supermajority. So they were able to override anything that the governor vetoed, and they did. And that's how Act 181 became law in June of 2024. That's the chronology of how this thing came into play. Many of the provisions in the act I don't have any problem with. There are now designations of certain areas of the state that get tiered, and Tier 1 is divided into Tier 1A, Tier 1B, and then there's a Tier 2 and then a Tier 3. Tier 3 is the most rural areas of the state, supposedly, who will still have to undergo full Act 250 review before they're issued a permit to do anything. Tier 2 is a little less restrictive, but you still got to go through Act 250. And then the one that really, I think, helped Rutland City out and the so-called designated downtown areas is Tier 1, and that relieves a lot of the administration of Act 250, and it centers around housing development. But I think what a lot of people didn't realize was the farmers, and I'm on Senate Agriculture in the morning, are now in a position where they can't do anything with their land. And so in many ways, Act 181 took away landowners' rights, in my opinion, and the opinion of farmers that came in and testified. And so I think we need to tweak certain provisions of the act. Whether or not we can do that, I don't know. Again, we're recording this show on the 22nd of March. There is another bill in play. It's a Senate bill with a number of 325 that will take away some of the provisions, or at least delay implementation till about 2030. One of them has to do with this road rule, which means if the road that you want to put in, let's say you have a piece of property somewhere in Canaan, and you want to build a house on that land, it's your land, and the road that would be going into the, it's not a development, it's your house, is 800 feet long or more, you have to go through a full Act 250 permit process in order to build a house on your own land. So this bill that's in play would delay the implementation of that till 2030. And then we're looking at Tier 3 exemptions too. And I don't know where this is going to all wind up, but it wasn't 25 words or less, but in a few minutes, that's the gist of the bill. And I know that, a lot of the folks in the legislature have received requests to at least take another look at this bill and make any changes we can to allow people, if they own their own land, to pretty much do what they want. I mean, that's the way that it's been in Vermont forever. And unfortunately, this changes that. So I don't know where it's going to wind up, but I know your committee and the House, Chris, has had a lot to do with Environment and Act 250. Yeah, and we're getting into discussing Act 181 now, and but it's even we're finding that it's even further reaching than just Tier 2 and Tier 3. I mean, last week we were discussing the effects it's going to even have on 1B, on small farmers and homesteaders that are in those developed areas that are moving out towards them or around them, and they may lose their right to be able to homestead and farm and do those types of things. The Tier 3, it doesn't disallow you maybe to do stuff with your land, but it makes it so difficult and so expensive that for the average Vermonter, and again, getting back to the Vermonter that works and lives in this economy, in the Vermont economy, and has to, do their finances within that economy, it is crushing. It is crushing, and essentially, it does take away your property rights because, if you have a farm and you want to, your children are interested in continuing that, and you want to break off a few acres of land for them so they can build a house next to you and help you continue with farming and eventually take it over, it makes it nearly impossible for them to do it because of the price and all the red tape that has to, you have all the hoops you have to jump through. It's just not right. It's going to have severe implications on rural folks. I guess I can't say that any clearer. There's a five-member board that's been appointed, the LURB, Land Use Review Board, and these folks are going to be making the decisions on what these tiers are. They're not going to come and ever see your property or walk around it. They're going to make those decisions from a computer screen. And I have a problem with that. To me, one of the things that I was involved in early on with Brian and the Senate delegation was the effects of the 3-acre rule, and it's the same deal. People, base the 3-acre rule off maps and photos, and they never visited the land. That's another rule that's harmed people. And, I just think that some of the things that we undertake up there have unintended consequences. The governor, last biennium, he was overridden 8 times. His vetoes were overridden 8 times. And when we look at what those things were and we see that they're now coming into effect, they were really bad decisions. It's not just Act 181. It was Act 59, the 2030-2050 rule. We had the safe injection site that is now just is falling apart. Nobody wants a building. They're talking about a mobile thing. The whole thing is just a mess. And there's just been a lot of unintended consequences. And and one of the things that stood out really for me that I think is so important, and everybody should know this in the entire state, is the difference that this balance has made with the elimination of having one party, and I don't care which party it is, having complete rule and not having to work with folks and not having to sit down and talk and compromise.
it has been very detrimental. And this change in balance is good. And while it doesn't allow us to get some good bills through for folks, it has allowed us to stop the bad ones. So when you go to vote next November, I think that you need to really think long and hard and set your ideological views aside and think, this person that's telling me that they want to serve and represent me, are they really going to represent my views? Are they going to represent my neighbor's views? Are they going to do the right things for us and our people? I think that's important, and it deserves serious consideration when you walk into the booth next November.
We'll be back with more with Representative Chris Pritchard here on Catamount Community Connection after this. We're back on Catamount Community Connection, and this week again we're talking with Representative Chris Pritchard, who lives in Paulet and represents that community in the Vermont House, along with Middletown Springs, Rupert, Wells, and Tinmouth. The other, I don't know if it was a complication, and we were starting to talk about Act 181, is the Supreme Court decision last summer, which had to do with municipalities being able to regulate farming in certain areas. And for many years, it was just assumed, again, it was a statute, but sometimes you can interpret things differently. And obviously the Supreme Court made that different interpretation, that municipality could regulate farms in some circumstances. So again, I'm in Senate Ag, so we have a miscellaneous bill that by the time you hear this show, hopefully will be passed. And we made it very clear that we did not agree with the interpretation that the Supreme Court made. And I think in a way they were saying to the legislative branch, make it clearer, make your language more precise as to where you feel municipalities should be able to regulate farming and where it shouldn't. So we'll give you an example. If in downtown Rutland, there was a half acre or maybe an acre piece of land on which there were 100 pigs right in downtown Rutland, and the farmer had no ability to manage the waste coming off that acre or anything else, I think most people could agree, you need to really kind of regulate that. You need to make some rules regarding that. And we went back and forth in Senate Ag for a long time trying to decide how big that parcel should be before the municipality was able to come in and make rules and ordinances about it. I'm not sure we got it 100% right, but it's going to go to the full General Assembly at some point. And what we wanted to do was represent to the best of our ability all kinds of farms, both dairy farms, vegetable farms, and beef farms, and everything else in between, and make it okay for people to know that they could farm even in a downtown urban area as long as certain conditions were met. So I don't know where it's going to wind up, but that was another complication with Act 181 was the Supreme Court decision from last summer. And I don't blame the Supreme Court. I think we needed to be a little bit clearer and more precise with our language, and hopefully we've at least begun that process. So we have about 10 minutes left on the show, and we've talked a lot about some of the things that Chris liked about being in the legislature, a few things that he found uncomfortable, if you will, or at least frustrating to some degree. But I want to give you a couple chances to, I know you have a big event coming up in April. You are a huge supporter of hunting and fishing and all kinds of outdoor activity, which, again, is very important in the areas that you represent. So tell us a little bit about your experience with the outdoor sports, if you will.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. It's something that's very important to me. I got involved. I didn't really come from a hunting family. I remember getting my first firearm. It was a BB gun for Christmas. My mother was having a fit about it, and Dad I don't know, it wasn't like the Christmas Story, but Dad ended up getting me a BB gun, and it's something that really interests me. I loved being out in the woods, so it's been a passion of mine for my whole life, and especially as far as the wild turkey is concerned. I'm just I'm very passionate about wild turkey hunting. I love to do it. So I've tried to give back in these areas. I've been a certified hunter and safety instructor for the state of Vermont for 35 years. So I hold a few classes every year with my friend Martin Van Buren, who owns a sporting goods store in Poultney, and we hold classes for firearms, hunter safety, and bow hunter safety at the Poultney Fire Department every year. I've gotten heavily involved in the UVM shooting sports, 4-H shooting sports program. I belong to a club in Paulet, a local club in Paulet, and I'm a shotgun instructor there. So, we have the 4-H shooting sports has several disciplines that we teach the kids, and the shotgun is my game. I've been fortunate enough to represent the state of Vermont as a coach for the Vermont shotgun team in Grand Island, Nebraska at the 4-H Nationals. I've got a chance to go out there twice, and I've been involved with the 4-H UVM 4-H shooting sports for 20 years, and so it's something that I really like to do. So what's coming up? The big thing that I've been involved in the select board in Paulet reached out to me and asked if I and Rose Smith, who is the president of the Historical Society in Paulet, would undertake a project for them. And basically, if people aren't aware of it, the wild turkey was extirpated from this state. And in 1969, the state decided to do a restoration program and bring it back. A biologist by the name of Ben Drake was heavily involved in it. He went to Steuben and Allegheny counties, live trapped some turkeys with the Vermont or New York Department of Environmental Conservation, brought them back, and Vermont started a restoration program. And that restoration program started in the town of Paulet. And it was a collaboration between the Fish and Wildlife, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, New York DEC, and landowners in Paulet, landowners and the citizens of Paulet. And and it's probably arguably one of the greatest conservation success stories in Vermont history. There was 17 birds released. Now their descendants occupy every county, every town, every gore in the state of Vermont. The first season occurred 4 years later in 1973. The very first turkey that was shot in the state of Vermont was shot by a farmer by the name of John Hathaway, who lived in Paulet. He had finished his milking chores in the morning, and still in his blue coveralls, grabbed his shotgun, a couple shells, and his box call, and headed out to the woods. And he is the person that actually it was recorded as the very first turkey that was ever shot during that season. And there was 12 birds taken during that first season. And now there are over 45,000 wild turkeys in the state, and the average spring season we take around 5,000. So it's just and we've helped other states with their restoration programs. It's been a great success. So on April 18th at the West Paulet Fire Department at 2:00, we are going to celebrate that. And there is going to be a ceremony. The Fish and Wildlife, Vermont Fish and Wildlife Commissioner and much of his staff will be there Tom Decker from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service will be there. National members and local chapters from the NWTF have been invited to be there. The lieutenant governor is going to be there. I think hopefully there's going to be quite a few legislators that are going to attend. And I've asked the governor several times. I'm trying to work on him to see if he would do this. It's going to be a great day for the people of Pollitt, I think, and I'm looking forward to it. We worked with state agencies on this. Bill Gray from the Rail Trail and Jackie Casino have just absolutely been wonderful. The marker will be sited at the head of the rail trail in West Pollitt. I saw Bill last week on my way to the State House, and we met, and he was on his way to West Pollitt to do the dig safe area so they can put the marker in, and they've already made a kiosk, so I'm really looking forward to it. It's just it's been a great experience, and it's been great working and collaborating with all the folks. And I just got to give another shout out to Rose Smith from the Pollitt Historical Society. She has just absolutely been wonderful in helping the Fish and Wildlife organize this. So,
I can remember when Jack Healy and I would do the morning show on one of our stations here. He would argue about turkeys being able to fly. And so I'm curious, you mentioned in 1969, turkeys were brought back, and there were, I don't know if you said 17, maybe 12, however many birds there
17 birds.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how did they migrate from Pollitt up to the Northeast Kingdom? Do they fly? Do they walk?
Yeah.
How do they get there?
Yeah, well, they can fly very well.
Okay.
But this is again, part of, and thanks for bringing that up, Brian. So what they did is those turkeys, they were retrapped, and there was distributions across the state.
Okay.
There was one in Hubbardton, Rockingham, Saxton's River, and they just kept expanding. So they did do relocations, off that. I spoke to Ed Cleveland, who's a resident from Pollitt, and he told me that they had live trapped some off his farm. The person that took over from Ben Drake, the biologist, had live trapped some of them, and those birds were relocated to Saxton's River. So yeah, it was a great, out of all the great things the Fish and Wildlife Department does, all the restoration programs they've done over the years, this really, I think, was one of the most successful of all, in my mind.
So again, we have a lot of different fowls of the species, and some of them are seemingly made to fly. And turkeys, to me, never sort of fit. They're heavy. They're sort of awkward even when they walk. And so, how far can they actually fly?
Well, they can glide for over a mile.
Oh, okay.
They're a strong bird. They. Believe me, any turkey hunters can tell you they can fly, and they can get off the ground quick and be gone. So
okay,
yeah.
So April 18th at the fire station, you said in Pollitt.
In Pollitt, and if people want to make a day about it, I'm going to take this advantage to plug it. Well, I'm on here.
Sure.
At 10 o'clock in the morning at the Kehoe Conservation Camp the same day in Bombazine, our 4-H club, the Oxbow Shooting Sports Club, is going to be holding their 20th annual Bart Jacob turkey calling contest at the Kehoe camp. And you're all invited to come to that. It's a contest for kids, and it's a really great time. The Commissioner Batchelder will be there. Lieutenant Governor Rogers said he is also going to be attending. Tom Decker from U.S. Fish and Wildlife. And so we'll have a fun morning with the kids doing the turkey calling contest. We have raffles and so on and so forth. And we will be able to leave there in time, if you'd like, to go to the West Pollitt ceremony. So it's 10 to 1, and that'll give ample time to get to West Pollitt and be part of that celebration.
Do you have any idea that maybe too many people, like the Pollitt fire station isn't that big? How many people can comfortably get inside?
We hope there's it's like a rock concert. We hope it's
Maybe you can
full
move it
and
outside.
people outside.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think so. We hope the weather's good, and the rail trail where the marker is going to be installed is a 100-yard walk from the fire department. Okay. So yeah, West Paulet's population hopefully is going to double or triple on that day.
Good. Yeah, I think it's a great event.
Yeah.
And again, mark it down, April 18th. If you wanted to go to the Keogh Conservation Center first, it's at 10, and then the actual ceremony back in Paulet is at 2. Yeah. And hopefully we can get a whole bunch of people there. And you've been good to promote that in the legislature too, I know. So hopefully we'll have a lot of officials there. Yeah. So we've got about a minute and a half, 2 minutes here to, wrap things up or something. I personally wish you were going to seek re-election. I know you're not, so I'm not going to beat a dead horse, so to speak. But again, I want to thank you for your years of service to those 5 towns, Middletown Springs, Rupert, Wells, Tinmouth, and where you live in Paulet. I think you've done admirable work, again, helping people, not necessarily introducing 183 bills that all passed. That's really not, to me, the way in which you should value and judge how well you've done. I think you've done a great job to represent those 5 towns. I didn't know if you had any final thoughts for us.
Yeah, thanks so much, Brian, and thanks for giving us the opportunity. And I have to say, thank you so much for your mentorship. Brian and I are the first ones at the State House every morning. We've gotten, I call Brian number 1 because he's always the first one there. I think maybe once or twice I beat him, but he's usually the first one there. I'm just grateful to him, and there's so many legislators that have reached out to me to help guide me and help me through this process. But the thing I really want to thank is I just want to thank the people that gave me this opportunity. It's quite humbling, and it was a honor really of a lifetime to be able to do this. And I've struggled with coming back, and it's been a very hard decision for me, to arrive at. But I'm grateful to everybody that gave me this opportunity. Thank you so much.
Representative Chris Pritchard. So when you see him, thank him and wish him well. I don't know if you're going to find a beach somewhere and just get in a lawn chair and relax.
I got to paint my house.
Oh, okay. Well, that's something. And thank you for being with us today. And we'll see all of you next week here on Catamount Community Connection.